Let's talk about CEO pay. It's one of those topics that's always in the headlines, right? It sparks so much debate, so much outrage. But with all that noise, the real question is kind of mysterious. What are we actually paying for? Well, today we're going to treat this like a detective story. We're going to follow the clues from a really groundbreaking study to figure out what's going on inside the black box of executive compensation. So let's just jump right into the question that's on everybody's mind. Do these CEOs really deserve those huge paychecks? I mean, it feels like it should be a simple yes or no answer. But the truth, well, it's buried in this fascinating clash of different theories and, as you're about to see, some data that is so surprising it basically changes the entire case. For decades, this whole investigation has had two main suspects. So in one corner, you've got this theory of efficient contracting. This story says that a high salary packed with stock options is actually a really smart, efficient tool. It's how the board makes sure the CEO wants the exact same thing as the shareholders, a skyrocketing stock price. When the company wins, the CEO wins. Simple. It's all about alignment. But in the other corner, there's a much more cynical take, the CEO power theory. This story argues that powerful CEOs, often with a friendly board, are basically just writing their own checks. Here, pay isn't tied to performance at all. It's tied to influence. So which one is it? Let's start following the clues. Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to rethink what performance even looks like. Then we'll look at the shape of pay. And that is going to lead us to a huge disconnect between pay and performance. After that, we'll dig into why this all matters and how it completely reframes the whole mystery. All right, let's get into our first clue. And trust me, it's a big one. To crack this case, we have to throw out a really fundamental assumption that most of us have about how talent and performance actually work. You know, we instinctively think of talent on a bell curve, like height, for example. Most people are kind of around the average height, with a few people who are super tall and a few who are super short. For a long time, that's exactly how researchers in boards thought about CEOs, too. Most are average, a few are great, and a few are, well, duds. But what if that's just completely wrong? Because the new reality, what the data actually shows, looks like this, a power law distribution. So forget that gentle slope of the bell curve. A power law has this sharp peak and then a really, really long tail. What that means is that while most CEOs are clustered down at one end, creating some modest value, a tiny number of star performers, way out on this tail, are responsible for a massive, almost unbelievable amount of their company's success. Think of it like the 80-20 rule, but on steroids. And look, this isn't just some abstract theory, the evidence is overwhelming. A huge study of over 4,000 CEOs across 22 industries found that a whopping 86% of the time, their performance didn't fit a bell curve, it fit a power law. And it turns out this is the normal pattern for really complex, high-autonomy jobs where one person's decisions can have a massive exponential impact. And, that perfectly describes being a CEO. And to see just how extreme these star performers can be, look at this number. This is the performance score for one CEO, Dennis Barcema of Redback Networks. Now, this score is based on how much value the company creates above the cost of its assets. And it's so high that it's almost statistically impossible. This guy is a true outlier of the outliers. In fact, the researchers who found this put it perfectly. They said that if you assume performance is a normal bell curve, superstar CEOs like Barcema simply should not exist. Their performance is that much of a statistical anomaly. So our first clue is now crystal clear. CEO performance isn't some gentle curve. It's a brutal tower law, where just a few stars generate almost all the value. Okay, so that's clue number one. Star performance is incredibly rare and extreme. So now let's move on to our second clue and see if the money follows the same trail. Does CEO compensation have that same distinctive shape? And the answer is a resounding yes. The study found that 91% of the time, CEO pay, and it doesn't matter if you're looking at total compensation, bonuses, or stock options, it also follows a power law. A tiny fraction of CEOs are taking home a hugely disproportionate slice of the total pay pie. Now here's where it gets really interesting, because this sets up a kind of logical trap. We have two power laws, one for performance, creating a few superstars, and another for pay, creating a few mega earners. The obvious conclusion, the one that makes that efficient contracting theory look like the answer, is that these have to be the same people. The system works. Case closed, right? The superstars are just the mega earners. And that brings us to the climax of our investigation. We have our two main clues, the shape of performance and the shape of pay. Now,
It's time to put them together.
This is it. This is the multi-million-dollar question. Are those star CEOs, the ones generating unbelievable value for their companies, the very same people getting those unbelievable pay packages? The answer is a shocking no. And it's not even close. Just look at this. Of the CEOs in the absolute top 1% of performers, we're talking the true superstars, the Dennis Barzamas of the world, only 5% of them are also in the top 1% of earners. Let me say that again. For every 20 of the absolute best of the best performing CEOs, 19 of them are not among the highest paid. And this isn't some weird fluke that only happens at the very, very top. As we broaden the search, the picture actually gets worse, not better. The pattern holds true right across the board. No matter how you slice it, top 5%, top 10%, top 20%, the overlap between the best performers and the highest earners is just incredibly small. The conclusion is inescapable. There is a massive, absolutely stunning disconnect between creating value and capturing it. So what does this all mean for our case? Why does this broken link between pay and performance matter so much? Well, for starters, it completely blows a huge hole in our first suspect's alibi. That whole efficient contracting theory, it's pretty much dead in the water. I mean, if pay was really an efficient tool to reward performance, that overlap we saw should be close to 100%, not hovering down in the single digits. The system is clearly not working the way that tidy economic theory says it should. And here's the real-world consequence, the actual mechanism of the crime, if you will. Boards almost always benchmark pay against the industry average. But here's the thing. In a power law world, a star performer isn't just a little bit better than average, they are magnitudes better. Tying pay to the average is like paying a basketball team based on their average height. You absolutely guarantee one outcome. You systematically and massively underpay your 7-foot star center while overpaying almost everybody else on the team. This leads us to our final conclusion, the solution to this whole mystery. And it's a twist. The problem isn't what we all thought it was. It's not one injustice, it's two. What the data really reveals is a two-sided injustice. For years, all of us have been focused on the visible problem, overpayment. You know, the high earners who are not top performers. And yes, that's a real issue. But this investigation has uncovered a massive hidden problem that might be even bigger, underpayment. These are the top performers, the true value creators, who are not high earners. The real scandal isn't just one of these things, it's the toxic combination of both, happening at the same time. So let's close the case file on this one. Here's the real story. A tiny fraction of CEOs creates an immense amount of value, and a tiny fraction of CEOs receives an immense amount of pay. But the explosive finding of this investigation is that these are, for the most part, two completely different groups of people. The entire public debate has focused on the visible outrage of overpayment while completely missing the hidden injustice. We aren't paying our most valuable leaders what they're truly worth. And that leaves us with one final, kind of haunting question. If the system isn't set up to reward the star performers who create the most value for all of us, who exactly is it set up to reward?